Hello and welcome back to the Tao of Humaning. I'm Dr. Christine, your host and facilitator. For today's episode, we're going to be diving into one of my favorite topics. You will learn, if you are following along, that I have quite a few favorite topics, actually, when it comes to all of these explorations of what it means to be human and how we do this. How do we support ourselves? How do we support the people around us? How do we go about being human together? So, today we're going to be talking about the 5 elements as a foundational framework for better understanding our emotions and our energy. So, why does this matter? Well, for one, I see a lot in my clinic and just in my life, moving about with friends and family, that a lot of times we feel overwhelmed and concerned when we feel changes in our energy, whether it's, a dip of energy or having so much so much energy that we feel almost anxious. Um, Sometimes we can feel confused or overwhelmed by our emotions or by our energy states. And what I've found is that through understanding 5 elements as, one of these maps, right, that we talk about for understanding the language that our body is speaking, right? The 5 elements has been consistently one of my favorite lenses in order to first start understanding my own energy. And through that deeper understanding of my own energy, I've also seen that play out to benefit how I understand the energy of my partner and my son and patients. Like, I'm just able to identify what's showing up because I understand that better in myself first. Also, um, and this could be a topic that we dive into another time. This can be really useful. I guess I'll plant the seed now. It can be really useful for relating with other humans in a way that doesn't involve labels or judgment as much. So, for example, if I'm seeing someone showing up and they're experiencing anger, right? Through this lens and practice over the years, I'll see that and I'll be like, oh, wow, that person's their wood element's really showing up today. And that's a very kind of unconscious thing that happens now. Whereas before learning these and practicing these systems, I might have thought, oh, wow, that person's really angry. It's different, right? Do you feel the difference? If I'm saying, oh, that person's element, this wood element, is really loud today, right? It's like, oh, there's less entanglement and there's less story about what that means about that person, right? To me, it means that their wood is showing up, right? And maybe their wood needs a little more support. Like, you start to get into looking for resources versus if I say, "Oh, that person's so angry," right? Then I'm like, "Oh, I'm making a judgment that anger is bad," right? So then what ends up happening energetically is I'm telling myself anger's bad. So when anger naturally arises in myself, which it will because we're human, right? And it is one of those emotions that we experience, I'm going to have that story, that little whisper of like, oh, you shouldn't be feeling that. Anger's bad, right? Anger's not bad, right? We all feel anger. I don't know any human that hasn't felt anger, right? So we'll get into this lots. This is definitely an episode that's going to be referenced back to. The goal today is to lay this foundation so that you can start to see, oh, okay, this is what's showing up in myself. So that's the guidance. And my wish for you today is to start to see on a really high level, "Oh, okay, this is feeling more like earth. Okay, this is starting," you're starting to gather the data and you're starting to have a framework to be able to put that data into that will eventually start to make sense and become more useful over time. Okay? So far, so good. So, I guess my premise for this episode is like, what if these changes in emotion and energy that we feel naturally throughout the day, throughout our lives, aren't a problem? What if they are information? And also, a lot of times these changes that we feel are natural ebbs and flows. And this is one of those things that Chinese medicine is so beautiful at understanding is what's showing up in nature around us, and then how does that reflect into our bodies. So there is this kind of there's like an as above so below. There's a understanding that we are mirrors of what's showing up in the environment. Like we're not separate from nature. It's not like, oh, nature's over there, that's cool. And then we're over here, we're totally separate from nature somehow. We're not. We're not. And or exploring these different ideas can bring a lot of peace and spaciousness to our human experience. So I hope that is useful for you as well. There's a whole aspect of five elements that gets into personality types. And I may mention that on occasion because that is also something that I enjoy exploring. Um, it's not, we'll have a different episode about that too, about the different personality types and how they show up. I have done a lot of classes on that over the years and it's always a lot of fun. But it's not meant to be putting us into a box of, my wood shows up a lot, so that must mean I'm a wood type. And what does that mean? That's not my intention for this episode. Um, Oftentimes, depending on the season of life that we're in, different elements will show up in more robustness. They'll be louder in different times of our lives. Like, for example, Earth tends to be a very mothering kind of quality of energy. And so a lot of times moms will have more expression of their earth element because that's the natural phase that they're in, especially when the children are very small. Um, and that, again, will change over time when the kids get bigger. So anyway, I don't want to dive too far off the rabbit hole because some of you are very new to this and you're probably like, what are these elements that she's even talking about? So today is the day to lay the foundation for you all and start to get a sense of the energy of these elements. These are all considered to be states that we move through, and they're also considered to be energies that are present within our body, like just like the seasons. Okay. So each of these elements is found in nature. So the five elements are you ready? They're wood, fire, earth, metal, and water. And all of these things were originally found to be needed in nature for survival, right? Like we needed wood to be able to build, we needed fire to be able to cook and stay warm, we needed earth to be able to grow food and to have a harvest, we needed metal to be able to cut and to chop. And then we needed water, of course, for drinking and for growing, right? So even just understanding that, you can start to see how those might all be a little bit different, right? There's different qualities to wood than there is to metal, right? Their functions in our lives are also very different, right? So the way that we start to look at these is today we're going to look briefly at the themes for each of the elements and then kind of what is their emotional undercurrent when it's in balance and when it's out of balance. And that's something that I'll come back to often, is this idea of being in balance or out of balance. We're always shifting and changing. I don't think there's a human alive, most likely, that is in a state of total balance in all of their elements at all times. It just isn't how humaning works. I don't think we're meant to have um, that level of like broad spectrum balance. I do think that our systems and our body naturally want to move toward balance. So that's a lot of where acupuncture comes into play too, is we're reminding the body of that balance and we're encouraging that direction and removing things that might be getting in the way of that balance. um, but for today, let's think just on the energetics of the season and then the emotion. I think that's going to be probably the most useful to get us started. And I don't want to keep you here for 3 hours today. So my goal is to be mindful of our time and attention. So for wood, we often kick off with wood because it is the energy of springtime. And so wood is that energy of a sprout breaking through the soil and coming up through the earth. And this whole energy of new beginnings has to do with the wood element. Also, same energy of birth, giving birth is a very wood moment. It's that like starting fresh, coming in, we got lots of energy, right? That wood wants direction and movement. It's that part of us that needs to move our bodies. It needs to move our minds. It needs to have a bit of a sense of adventure. Um, when we want that and we're not getting it, so when we're not moving our bodies, we can feel a sense of frustration. And so that like frustrated, like that kind of energy is wood. Okay. And that can range all the way from a simple irritation to being like, oh, the guy cut me off in car line, whatever it is, right? I'd use that as a gauge for my wood element when I'm in car line. Like yesterday, I was like really irritated and I was like, oh, my wood needs some movement. Like I need to go make sure that I move my body later. Like mental note, got it. Because I know it doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of my schedule. If someone cuts me off in car line, it doesn't matter. It doesn't make a difference at all. But some days it does. Or it feels like it does, right? So that's that wood energy, and it can go from mild irritation all the way to full-blown rage. So there are a spectrum within all of these elements, but they all have that similar vibrational quality. Okay? When wood is really in balance, that's when we are able to sit down and we have this amazing sense of vision for our future. And there are reasons why these things all go together, but there's a sense of vision and there's a clarity that comes when wood is really in balance and flowing. The wood element needs that momentum and movement because it wants direction. Okay. So in our own lives, having these kind of checks of like, oh, my wood's a little off today, right? Feels a lot better than like, oh, I don't know, making up all kinds of stories about ourselves or others. It's just more joyful to feel like, okay, my wood's up. I got to go work out later. Okay, so that's wood. Wood is springtime. After spring comes summer. Summer is the element of fire. Fire is warmth. Fire is also a high energy element. It's the season of summer. So it's about, if you think about what you're doing in summer generally, right? You're connecting, you're out, you're having bonfires, you're doing all of these things that are connecting and oftentimes very filled with joy. And so joy is one of the emotions of the fire element. So when we feel joy, that is nourishing to all of the systems that are associated with the fire element. If we're looking at where fire gets stuck, so in school we're taught like overjoy is it's like too much joy, and it's not so much too much joy, but it can be. It's like too much stimulation, too much going on. In modern day life, that would be overwhelm and that more kind of anxious feeling. I feel like everyone's felt anxious, even if you don't have a diagnosis of anxiety. We've all had those moments where we feel like our breath gets a little shorter, a little higher in our chest. We start to like flutter a little bit. We might get sweaty, which has to do with also the fire element. Um, Fire has to do with how we express ourselves in this life. So, fire has a lot to do with communication. And when that is really in balance, we're able to communicate clearly. We feel a deep sense of peace in our hearts, aside from whatever's going on in our lives. Like sometimes life just is a little bit more peaceful, right? Like there's less chaos going on. Some seasons of our lives are more chaotic, right? And so that is more of a fire element kind of a feeling when we get that like overexcitement, not able to express, maybe feeling a little burnt out, like burning the candle at both ends often really affects the fire. Um, I think that's all I want to give for that today. I want you to get like a little flavor of each of the elements. Once we move from summer, the first thought is like, okay, next comes fall, right? But actually, in Chinese medicine, we have a late summer season that is called Earth. And Earth is the harvest time. This is a little bit of a pause before the energy starts to slow down in the fall. Okay. There's a couple of different theories about Earth energy. Some see it as being this late summer, some see it as a small pause between each season. I use that actually a lot in my regular life, and I will have an episode about that too. So, we've got 3 new episodes coming through this one, which is fun. Um, but it is this energy of coming home to center. And home is a really great word for earth because it is that kind of mama, nourishing, grounded energy. It's like if you think of like what a really healthy mother energy feels like being around, that's earth. It's the side of us that knows what to do to take care of ourselves. So it's not just about caring for others. And right, that comes up so much for moms, all of you moms who are listening. So much value in really taking that dedicated time to care for ourselves first, right? And understanding the nourishment that's available from life. That is a very mom earth kind of quality. And it's interesting thinking about the mom energy for earth because the the emotion associated with earth is worry. All of the mamas listening know, like, it just sort of comes with the job. Like, you worry about things that you never thought you would worry about. And then overthinking is also categorized in the 5 element system with earth. So worry, overthinking, rumination, um, when it's out of balance, it's that energy of doing everything for everyone else and not feeling nourished yourself. And that leads to also kind of a burnout, but there's a resentment piece that comes when the earth emotions are out of balance. And when it's in balance, it's very easy to see where the care is needed and where the nourishment is needed. And it's also energetically kind of a middle of the road. It's not a really quiet lacking of energy. It's not digging super into the depths like a water we'll talk about in a minute, but it's more just grounded and trusting and steady. It's that steady presence when it's in balance that is just so nourishing to be around. That's like earth in balance. when we catch ourselves worrying, especially when we lay down to go to sleep or when we're eating, when we're physically trying to nourish ourselves with food and we're worrying about stuff or we're thinking about to-do lists, that is very depleting to the earth element. Okay. Um, what else? Okay, so that's earth. So metal is the fall. And the fall energy is where things start to get a little more quiet, right? This is where we start to get metal has a lot to do with rhythms, and I always love because that kind of lines up with the school calendar starting after summer. So it's like, oh, okay, yes, we got some rhythm, we got some routines happening. It feels a little bit easier to like take care of all of the things, whereas summer can feel a little chaotic because there's so many different non-habitual things happening that are all super fun usually, but it's like it's very ungrounding. So this is where the energy starts to come down back into fall. Fall has to do with establishing rhythms, but the emotions in fall are grief. And so if you think of nature, right, if we're coming back to thinking about nature and all of these things, what's happening in the fall? I grew up in New England, so it's very, very tangible for me to think about fall. It's like the smells, the air is crisp, things are really like clear, and the trees are letting go, right? And they're letting go so that they can get quiet in winter and then receive that nourishment when it comes and they're ready to bloom again in the spring, right? It's this whole cycle of nature that is encompassed with the five elements. I hope this is making sense so far. So metal is this grief. And so a lot of times people will have grief that shows up, whether it's actually the physical season of fall or it's just a fall moment in their life, or just to plant the seed for now, if you're a cycling woman, sometimes that will show up more in your luteal phase. Metal relates more to the luteal phase of a menstrual cycle. Also another topic we can get into that I love talking about. Um, Metal has to do with how we hold on and how we release what is no longer serving us or what is ready to be released, right? Because a lot of times life will ask us to release things that we don't particularly want to release, right? Especially grief is such a great example. If you lose a loved one and, they meant something to you, they were valuable to you in your life, like, of course you're going to feel grief and sadness, right? That's just an expression of that value that they had for you. So metal is a really beautiful time to sit with that. I had a teacher who, she's so lovely. She would always talk about metal and how when you interact with someone who has a really strong metal, oftentimes it feels like you're walking into a church. Like there's a sense of reverence and a sense of connection with the divine or with God or something bigger than ourselves. That's a very metal kind of a quality or that metal aspect of ourselves. Because again, we all have all of these elements within us and they season through different times in our life. And yeah, sometimes you can be feeling more than one of these. I think that's the other piece that I want to share today. So, metal is this energy of fall. It's a little bit quieter. It has to do with grief and sadness. There's also a bit about integrity for metal. Um, I don't want to get too much into the personalities, but metal is kind of a fun one to start that with. But metal has to do with integrity. So being clear on your values. If you think about metal as money, something like coins, or gold, silver, right? All the metals are have value, right? And so when we get clear on what our values are and we're living our life in alignment with those values, that is a really healthy expression of metal. Okay. And it also plays together with this ability to be able to let go with ease. And as we let go, so the large intestine relates with the metal in Chinese medicine, and the lungs are the other paired organ. And the lungs have to do with how we receive, right? How we receive inspiration, literally breath and air, and also how we receive inspiration from above, right? Or from around us in our world. What do we find inspiring? And how do we hold that as a value and live from there? Okay. So noticing where you're feeling grief and sadness, noticing where you're feeling your energy being a little bit lower sometimes, and this is a point I really wanted to make today, sometimes your energy is lower because it needs to be a little bit lower. And that's okay. It doesn't mean that you need to necessarily like go get a coffee or change your supplements or go see a doctor. Sometimes, right? Obviously, make sure you're seeing your doctors. But my point is more that, like, noticing these natural ebbs and flows makes that space for you to be able to say, "Is this like, what is really being asked right now? What am I being told by my body?" Right? And those are always really valuable questions, which brings us to water. And water is the deepest depths of life. It is the winter season. Water is all about depth and that deep, deep wisdom and energetic reserves that we have. It's the part of us that sits with those really bigger questions in life of like, why am I here? Like, what am I doing? It has to do also with legacy. So, who are our supports? Like, where have we come from? And also moving forward, where are we going? Like, what are we leaving for a legacy in the world? That's a very watery kind of place to sit in. And it dovetails on that grief, right? Grief is kind of a heavier emotion in the body. And the emotion associated with water is fear. And there's a couple of layers of that. There's a more urinary bladder level fears, which are like a fear of spiders or, you know, a fear of, I don't know, spiders is one that's coming to my mind right now. When we look at the more deep fears of water, those moments are like, am I, like going to die? Like those are the big like life questions. Like, am I going to be alone? Water is the side of us that sits in the depths of those kind of questions. And a lot of times, especially in this society, we have a lot of discomfort sitting in those areas. And having an awareness that this is a normal, natural part of life, of our humaning, to sit there, to not get stuck there, right? So making sure if you are creating space for those bigger questions or those, looking at fears and things like that, that you have a support system in place so that you don't get stuck there. Also very important. But there is something I think when I think about water, I think about the unknown. It is really that, being able to be comfortable in the unknown. I had one teacher who would always talk about the unknown as actually as a mother energy because, humans, we have a lot of theories and ideas about where we come from before we're born and where we go to when we die, right? And ultimately, when you pare it all back, nobody really knows, right? There is this big question mark of, you know, well, where do we come from? Where are we going afterwards, right? And then we could get into the value of having a faith of some variety and, exploring those things in a way that feels nourishing and like being nourished from exploring those depths, right? And also being comfortable with other people in our lives when they're in something that's really heavier, right? And I think when we're first learning five elements or first hearing about it, honestly, the reminder is also great, even for people who have explored this before, noticing how our body responds when we're in those more quiet moments or we're sitting with someone who's in those quiet moments, right? how are we? And again, this isn't a place to have judgment on these things. This is really just collecting data about how your system is doing. Like, how's your water element feeling? Is it scared? Does it need some reassurance? If so, where would that reassurance come from? Right? Where would be the place to go to get that? Um, if not yourself, of course. But noticing, like, do you want to get up and run? Like, do you feel super uncomfortable? Like, if you're sitting with someone, they just found out their partner passed away, or, something big happens that brings up a lot of fear and unknown for people. Are you comfortable or not? And if not, how does it feel? Like, do you feel fiery? Do you feel angry? Do you feel sad? Like, what's the emotional tone that you're most comfortable with? And where do you feel less comfortable? There's nothing good or bad about, oh, I'm really comfortable with grief, but I'm not comfortable with wood. Great. It's just good information to have, right? Because as we explore the elements in these different ways, there are so many ways that we can learn to become more comfortable with all of the elements. And I really think that is an incredibly valuable exploration for everybody. I wish that everyone could know about five elements as a framework for understanding our energy and our emotions in a way that doesn't have the judgment and doesn't have any necessarily kind of problematic orientation to it. It's really just getting to know ourselves on a different level. And then the more that we know ourselves, the better we can support ourselves. And then the better we support ourselves, the better we can show up in our lives and be there for the people and the things that we love. Right? Okay. So your homework, if you will, or your quest, should you choose to accept it, is to observe and see, just start noticing where are you seeing these different kinds of energies showing up in your life, and just getting curious and paying attention. And then in future episodes, we'll be using the five elements as a framework for more specific things. We'll talk about hormones. There's amazing, amazing, amazing things for hormones for men and women with the five elements. There's things we can talk about with relationships and how we interact with each other. Maybe we'll do some personality conversation first. And then in general, how we work through transitions and change in our lives. Using the five elements to guide and support is a really beautiful framework. So thank you for being here once again. I really, really, really treasure this time together, and I look forward to seeing you on our next episode.